Undercover boss gets apple pie, sees the filling, then immediately calls the restaurant manager. They're old. Half of them can't even taste the difference. The words weren't shouted. They were whispered, smug, cruel, and careless. Said with an earshot of a man they never should have underestimated. No suit. No entourage. Just a 47-year-old man in a plain button-down shirt, holding a warm slice of apple pie. The same pie that made his family's name famous. From the outside, it looked perfect, golden crust, cinnamon glaze, that nostalgic aroma, but with one slow cut, the filling oozed out. Watery, artificial, wrong. He took a bite and everything stopped. I know that recipe. That's not it. That's not apple pie. That's betrayal in a crust. He didn't yell. He didn't storm out. He simply pulled out his phone and started documenting. Because this wasn't just a bad batch. This was a cover-up, and someone was about to get exposed. A fake ingredient. A fake supplier. A fraud so big it stretched across multiple states. All hidden beneath a pie no one ever expected the boss to taste. But he did. And now, he's coming for everyone involved. Have you ever eaten something familiar and instantly realized something was wrong, yet no one else seemed to care? Stay quiet. Assume it's nothing. Speak up. Demand answers. Even if you're the only one, comment 1 or 2 below. Your answer might reveal more than you think. Shall I continue with the next segment, where Jackson walks into the Scranton location? Jackson Hart tugged his baseball cap lower as he stepped through the front doors of the Golden Hearth Bakery and Grill. In Scranton, Pennsylvania, the soft scent of cinnamon and brown butter lingered in the air, but something felt off. The glass display case was smudged with fingerprints. The marble counters streaked with caramel sticky signs that should have been cleaned hours ago. Behind the register, a teenager leaned against the pastry rack, scrolling through her phone completely unaware. For most customers, it would have been nothing. Just a slow shift. A minor oversight. But Jackson wasn't most customers. He was the man whose family name was etched into every Golden Hearth location across the country. From a humble pie stand at county fairs to a national brand with over 600 stores, he'd built it from scratch. But this location, the one in Scranton, had been blinking yellow in his regional reports for weeks. Margins too high, costs too low, and yet, no complaints. No red flags from the local team. It didn't add up. Just a slice of classic apple pie, Jackson said, his voice casual. He handed over a 10. Watched as the cashier barely looked up, punched the register with one hand, shoved his change across the counter with the other. No smile. No eye contact. And definitely no welcome to Golden Hearth, the greeting every employee was trained to give. Strike one. He carried his receipt to a corner booth by the window. From there, he could watch the floor and the kitchen pass through, while blending into the lunch crowd. His disguised dark jeans, a plain tee, and 2-day stubble had already worked in 5 other cities. No one looked twice. Not even when the girl called out, "Number 42. Jackson stood and picked up his tray. A white ceramic plate held a neatly cut slice of apple pie, golden brown lattice top, a swirl of glaze, and a scoop of vanilla bean ice cream. On the surface, it looked exactly like what he'd spent 20 years perfecting in his mother's kitchen. But the smell, it was off, subtle, but unmistakable to someone who knew the real thing. He sat down, slid his fork through the crust with practiced hands. The crust gave way, and the filling slumped outward, slow and heavy. Jackson leaned in. No texture, no sliced fruit, just a glossy, over-sweetened goop the color of canned syrup. He frowned. The filling should have had layers, warm apple slices with a bit of bite, flecks of cinnamon, traces of nutmeg. It was mushy, artificial, almost gelatinous. He took a bite. Instantly, his taste buds recoiled. The sweetness was sharp, chemical. The aftertaste lingered, metallic and unnatural. This wasn't just off-brand. It was fraudulent. Jackson had tasted every batch of that pie since he was 27. He could have identified it blindfolded. This wasn't his product. He forced himself to chew, swallow, set the fork down. Then, with steady fingers, he lifted the plate from the tray, Tucked just beneath the napkin, half hidden, was a small printed label likely meant for kitchen use only. It read, "Product. Apple pie filling Liberty Orchard imports." His eyes narrowed. Liberty Orchard wasn't on the company's approved vendor list. Golden Hearth had 2 nationwide suppliers for fruit fillings, both family farms that used fresh-cut produce, not imported syrup. Every franchise owner knew this. It was bolded in the training manual. Explicit in the franchise agreement, substitutions, especially unapproved bulk ingredients, weren't just violations. They were grounds for immediate review. His phone buzzed. A text from Dana, his VP of Field Operations. She had helped coordinate this entire undercover visit. "How's the pie?" Jackson replied without hesitation. "Fake. Check everything we have on Liberty Orchard imports. 3 dots. Then, that's not one of ours." Jackson stared at the pie again, his expression darkening. This wasn't a fluke, wasn't a lazy shortcut. It was calculated. A decision. Someone had swapped out the one product that defined the brand, and hoped no one would notice. They were wrong. He noticed. And if you're noticing something too, don't keep it to yourself. Share this story, and subscribe, because what's coming next, that's just the beginning. Sometimes, all it takes is one bite to uncover the truth. Jackson took a breath, steadying his pulse, as he slid the tampered slice back onto its plate. 20 years ago, he stood beside his mother in a cramped kitchen, learning how to layer apple slices just right so the filling didn't collapse. She used to say, "A good pie stands on its own. A dishonest one sinks under its lies." And now, here it was, a collapsed lie, served on company china. He tucked the Liberty Orchard label into his pocket and scanned the dining room. The energy was hollow. Staff moved mechanically. Customers munched in silence. A digital menu board flickered overhead, still looping a promo from last season. It was midday, but the vibe felt more like closing time. Tired, unmotivated, barely functioning. Behind the counter, one worker struggled to refill the ice bin with one hand, while texting with the other. Near the pastry fridge, 2 teenagers giggled over something on a phone. And no one seemed to notice or care that Jackson was watching, which, in a way, was exactly what he needed. He leaned back in the booth, opened his phone's voice recorder, and quietly dictated, "Observed multiple food safety violations. Low staff engagement. Possible unreported supplier substitution. Scranton unit. 12:47 p.m. His eyes drifted toward the back of the store, past the prep area, to a frosted glass door labeled "Office Authorized Personnel Only." The person behind that door, that was the one he really needed to meet. Karen Paulson, franchisee, store manager, 10-year veteran of the Golden Hearth system. Jackson had read her file that morning. 7 years of solid performance. But in the last year, noticeable shift. High profits, low ordering costs, and oddly, silence. Too much silence. His phone buzzed again. Dana. Liberty Orchard was incorporated last year in Delaware. No food service history. Registered agent, Charles Paulson. Jackson stared at the name. Any relation to Karen? The response came fast. Her brother. "I'm pulling financials now." Jackson's jaw tightened. This wasn't a careless order. It was intentional. A family-owned supplier, operating outside company policy, hidden by clean metrics and strategic silence. It was a shell game. And if Charles was involved, Karen wasn't just complicit, she was orchestrating it. A shadow moved behind the frosted office door. Jackson quickly pocketed his phone, returned to sipping his water, and waited. Moments later, the door creaked open. A young employee, maybe 19 or 20, stepped out with a clipboard and whispered something to the cashier. Their eyes flicked toward Jackson. The cover was thinning. Jackson stood calmly, disposed of his tray, and approached the counter. "Could I get the store phone number?" he asked. The girl blinked. It's online," she said, gesturing vaguely at the wall. Jackson smiled, pulled out his phone, and typed the number he already knew. The landline rang. Through the narrow office window, he saw a woman in her 40s pick up the phone. Maroon Golden Hearth cardigan, blonde bob, crisp voice. This is Karen Paulson. How can I help you? Jackson didn't disguise his voice. Karen, this is Jackson Hart. I'm sitting in your restaurant. I'd like to speak with you now. There was a pause. Sharp intake of breath. Excuse me, I'm at table 4 by the window. You've just served me pie made with Liberty Orchard filling. I don't believe that's an approved supplier. Come join me. Through the window, he saw her freeze. Her eyes scanned the room, then landed on him. Recognition hit like a splash of ice. Water. Jackson raised a hand, a small wave. Calm, precise, in control, of course, Mr. Hart, she said finally. Right away, he ended the call. Returned to the booth. His stomach wasn't turning from the fake pie anymore. Now, it was the quiet burn of betrayal. The kind that sinks deep when someone poisons your house from the inside. He straightened the napkin beside the plate, set his phone face down, and waited. The filling had spilled out, and now, so would the truth. Karen Paulson stepped out of the office with a composure that might have fooled anyone else. Professional, poised, every strand of her blonde bob in place, cardigan neatly buttoned. But Jackson had been in enough boardrooms and surprise interviews to recognize the signs: the tightness around her eyes, the smile that never reached her cheeks. Mr. Hart, she said as she approached the booth, voice steady, breath a little too measured. What a surprise. If we'd known, you didn't. Jackson cut in, gesturing to the empty seat across from him. Sit, she obeyed, but not before casting a glance toward the kitchen. Several employees had paused mid-motion, sensing the shift in air. One whispered. Another slipped into the walk-in fridge. Jackson noticed everything. He slid the half-eaten slice of pie toward her. Go on. Take a bite. Karen blinked, caught off guard. Sir, that pie, take a bite. Tell me what you taste. She hesitated, then picked up the fork, cut a small piece. Chewed. Too long. Well, Jackson asked. It's sweeter than usual, she said carefully. But our batches do vary slightly. No, they don't, Jackson said flatly. Not if they're made to spec. Not if they're made with the same filling we've used since 2008. And definitely not if they're made with fresh cut apples, which this isn't. Karen folded her hands in her lap tightly. I can assure you, Mr. Hart, we maintain Golden Hearth standards in every aspect. Jackson pulled the Liberty Orchard label from his pocket and placed it on the table between them. Then explain this. Her eyes flicked down, froze, then slowly lifted back to meet his. We've had some supply delays, she said, almost too quickly, especially with inflation on produce. Liberty Orchard gave us a short-term alternative at a competitive rate, without authorization. Jackson interrupted. Without informing corporate? Without updating the supplier database? Which, if I hadn't looked under that plate, you would have kept hiding, Mr. Hart. I understand how this looks, Karen said, tone shifting firmer, now more defensive. But we've been operating under extreme constraints. Logistics, labor shortages. Everyone's adapting. I made the call to keep the store running to avoid waste. You made the call, Jackson repeated quietly, to compromise our product, our brand, my family's name, and you didn't even have the decency to tell us. Karen straightened her spine. It was never about deceit. It was about survival. The cost of our original filling has gone up nearly 60% since last fall. If I'd stuck to the manual, I'd be operating at a loss. And instead, you padded your profit margin, Jackson said coolly, because this isn't just about one location. I've already seen the numbers. Your costs dropped, your profits rose, and you did it quietly, just quiet enough that no one noticed. A beat passed. Karen opened her mouth, then shut it again. Jackson leaned back, letting the silence stretch. Every second made her squirm. Tell me, Karen, he said at last, how long have you been using Liberty Orchard products? For months. And is it just the filling? She hesitated. A few other items. Brownie mix, canned cherries. We kept it within reason. You kept it in the dark, Jackson corrected. He reached for his phone and tapped the screen. The voice recorder was already running. He placed it on the table face up. We'll be testing the samples today. If you have anything to add, this is the time. Karen's posture stiffened, her voice cooled. I believe I'll wait to speak with legal counsel. Jackson nodded slowly. That's your right. He gathered the plate and label, slipped both into a zippered pouch. Around them, the restaurant buzzed, but at that booth, the air was still. You'll be hearing from us again soon, he said. In the meantime, I suggest you leave everything exactly as it is. Don't change the records. Don't warn anyone. Karen said nothing, but her jaw clenched. Jackson stood, took a few steps, then turned back over his shoulder. And Karen, if you've built your profits on lies, you'd better hope they don't crumble as fast as your pie filling. He stepped out into the cold Pennsylvania air, slipping his phone into his pocket, and his thoughts into a warpath. The pie had cracked, the truth was leaking, and Jackson Hart had just taken the first bite. The hotel suite smelled faintly of espresso and printer toner. Jackson paced the room, phone pressed to his ear. On the coffee table, the same manila pouch unopened. Inside it, the pie slice, the label, and the last trace of trust he'd had in Karen Paulson. On the other end of the line, Dana was already deep into the investigation. We've got confirmation, she said. Liberty Orchard is a front. Paper trail leads to a holding company in Delaware, registered to an address tied to Paulson's brother Charles. No food licenses, no FDA filings. They incorporated 18 months ago. Jackson rubbed his forehead. Which means they were created for one reason, to funnel product through the back door. Dana's voice dropped. There's more. I spoke with compliance. That ingredient label you found? The code matches a rejected sample from last year. Elevated sulfites, and a thickener not approved for food use in the US. Jackson froze. You're telling me Karen's been serving pie with a filling that wouldn't pass FDA inspection? Yes. And, based on invoices, she's been doing it for at least 4 months, quietly, consistently. Jackson walked to the minibar, poured a glass of water, and stared at the amber-colored slice sealed in plastic. It looked harmless, familiar even, but it wasn't what it claimed to be, and that made it dangerous. I want full testing, he said. Full spectrum. Preservatives, sweeteners, anything out of spec. Pull the lab team off everything else. Get them here. Already called. Dana replied. ETA under an hour. True to her word, 45 minutes later, a knock came at the door. Dr. Elenamy, lead food scientist for Golden Hearth, rolled in a black testing unit that looked more like medical equipment than bakery gear. She offered a curt nod. I assume this is urgent. Jackson handed her the pouch. It's not just low quality. We think it's a synthetic blend from an unauthorized supplier, possibly dangerous. Dr. Me pulled on gloves, laid out sterile slides, pipettes, and a portable spectrometer. She moved quickly, precisely. A woman trained to detect deception in grams and molecules. Jackson stood back, arms crossed, eyes locked on the slice. As she extracted a sliver of filling and placed it under the scanner. What's our baseline? She asked. Recipe 3-7, Jackson replied. The one we've used for national distribution since 2011. Real fruit. No synthetic thickeners. No high-density preservatives. She tapped the screen. Baseline loaded. The machine hummed. Scans ran. Data filled the screen in clinical silence. Then she turned the monitor toward him. 2 graphs. Side by side. One for the original, one for the sample. You don't need a lab coat to see this, she said. Protein ratios off by 38. Natural sugars replaced almost entirely by corn-derived glucose. And this, she pointed to a red warning icon, is carboxymethylcellulose. It's banned in food service for children under 12. Jackson exhaled slowly. Bottom line? This isn't food, Dr. Me said. It's chemistry designed to look like pie, and if this is what customers have been eating for months, you've got a much bigger problem than just fraud. As she packed up her kit, Jackson turned back to his phone. Another update from Dana, colder than the last. We pulled merchant logs from Scranton, cross-referenced with shipping records. Our approved suppliers haven't delivered there in 5 months. 5 months. Every bite, every slice. A black market operation masquerading as homestyle goodness. Jackson sat on the edge of the bed. Thought of the customers, the families, the seniors, the children, people who trusted the Golden Hearth name to mean something, to be something. Homemade quality, real ingredients, always. Instead, they'd been fed a lie. His phone buzzed again. "You need to see this," Dana texted. "We traced payments from Polson's store to Liberty Orchard's account. Guess who signs them?" Jackson didn't need to guess. He opened the attachment. Karen Polson's signature, neat, deliberate. Dozens of transactions, all structured just below the internal audit threshold. He picked up the pie box. Same crust, same lattice, same packaging, but inside, a lie. And now, Jackson knew. It didn't stop in Scranton. It was time to find out how deep the crust went. The sun hadn't yet risen over the skyline when Jackson stepped out of the Starlight Inn, now dressed in the plain uniform of a corporate field auditor. Khaki slacks, navy collared shirt, clipboard tucked under his arm, a freshly laminated badge clipped to his chest. Quality Assurance, Golden Hearth Regional. A pair of glasses he didn't need completed the disguise. With Dana's help, he'd been inserted into the schedule as Mr. Jameson, an unannounced internal inspector. Spot checks on cleanliness, storage, food quality. But Jackson wasn't looking for crumbs in the corners. He was looking for what was hiding under the crust, and who was helping to keep it there. As he stepped through the glass doors of the Scranton store, the same faint sweetness greeted him. But now, it felt like perfume on a corpse. A young man behind the counter, early 20s, stood stiffly. "You must be Mr. Jameson. I was told to expect you." Jackson offered a firm handshake. "That's right. I'll need access to storage, prep logs, supplier records. I won't interfere with service." The name tag read, Evan. He led Jackson past the kitchen into the back. Same faces from the day before. Now stiffer, more alert. Word had gotten around. Karen Polson wasn't in yet. Her shift started later. "All our invoices are digital now," Evan explained. "Miss Polson keeps the paper backups in her drawer." Jackson sat at the desk, fired up the terminal. Dana's software had already created a hidden backdoor masked as a maintenance patch. Within seconds, he was inside the system, downloading every vendor log, order history, and inventory report. "You're in," Dana whispered through the earpiece hidden in his collar. Scranton's records looked clean at first glance. Regular orders from Maple Valley Orchards and Prescott Farms, which we know never delivered, Jackson muttered. "Correct. But those entries were duplicated. There's a hidden file tree labeled Vendor Alt." Jackson opened it. There it was. A parallel ledger of invoices from Liberty Orchard. Imports, all paid under a dummy business unit called Local Product Initiative. "They're keeping 2 sets of books," he whispered. "One for headquarters, one for themselves." Dana confirmed. "I cross-referenced the timestamps. Every gap in corporate deliveries matches a Liberty Orchard drop. At least 18 undocumented shipments in 90 days. Jackson printed a few falsified invoices, slid them under his clipboard. "I'll need to see current stock," he said to Evan. "Visual samples of fillings, crust mix, anything proprietary." And nodded, visibly uneasy. "Sure. Just heads up. Miss Polson usually handles that herself." "I'm sure she does," Jackson said deadpan. In the walk-in freezer, Jackson found crates stacked neatly. Some were stamped with official Golden Hearth logos. Others, plain white boxes marked only with tiny Liberty Orchard codes. He opened one. Inside, the same dull, syrupy mix he'd tasted the day before, bagged in plastic, unlabeled except for a batch number. "These weren't meant for inspection," he muttered. "They're hiding it in plain sight." A few minutes later, Evan returned with the tray. "Here's everything we've got in rotation. Raw filling, thawed filling, baked crust, finished slices." Jackson examined them closely. He spotted the differences immediately. Textures off, colors inconsistent, filling that jiggled more like gelatin than fruit. "How long have you worked here?" he asked. 9 months, Evan replied. "Transferred from Allentown when Miss Polson got promoted." "Noticed any changes in ingredients since then?" Evan hesitated. I'm not involved in ordering. She's pretty strict about vendor stuff, but I've seen local trucks show up. No Golden Hearth branding. Jackson took note. If you had concerns about quality, who would you report to? Directly to her, and said. She says handling things internally builds team culture. He paused, lowered his voice. But Carlos used to be assistant manager, said he raised concerns once. Next week, his hours got cut. Then he quit. Jackson thanked Evan and returned to the office. His mind was already racing. This wasn't a loophole. This was a system, built to run alongside corporate processes, feeding off the brand's name, while funneling profit into silence. His earpiece buzzed again, Dana's voice low and urgent. You need to see this. We've flagged 4 more stores. Same invoice patterns. Same fake vendor routing. All of them reporting to Polson in some form. Jackson stared at the screen. New names lit up. A store in Altoona. Another in Bethlehem. 2 more outside Pittsburgh. All showing perfect profit metrics. All using Liberty Orchard. This wasn't rogue, he said quietly. It was organized, coordinated, profitable. He looked back at the sample tray. She didn't just swap the filling, she swapped the system. And now, it was time to cut it open slice by slice. The air in the employee break room was stale and overly sweet, like someone had sprayed too much air freshener to cover the lingering scent of refrigerated pie dough. Jackson sat at the far end of the table, clipboard balanced on his knee, the same quality assurance badge clipped to his shirt. Calm expression, but behind it, his mind was firing like a machine. Over the next 2 hours, he quietly requested to speak with each member of the day shift team one at a time, behind closed doors. No rush, just routine interviews. It didn't take long to notice the pattern. The answers were clean. Too clean. No issues with suppliers. We love working here. Miss Polson runs a tight ship. Every response sounded like it had been copied from the handbook. Even their tone was the same, cheerful, cautious, rehearsed. A few junior staff couldn't even meet his eye. Jackson thanked them politely, took his notes, waited for the next. Finally, a younger girl stepped in, fidgeting with the edge of her apron. Her name tag read Tasha. The way she perched on the seat, backpack still slung over one shoulder, told him everything. She was new and nervous. 3 weeks, she said when he asked how long she'd been working at the Scranton store. It's my first real job. And how's the training been? Jackson asked gently. Does everything match what you learned in orientation? Tasha hesitated. I guess so. I don't really have anything to compare it to. Jackson leaned in slightly, lowered his voice. Tasha, anything you share here stays between us. These interviews are confidential. We're just trying to understand how things really run. Her grip tightened around her backpack strap. Miss Polson, she has ways of finding things out. What do you mean? Tasha glanced at the closed door. She says everything here stays in-house. That corporate doesn't like being bothered with small stuff. And last week, she made us all sign these papers. She paused. Confidentiality forms, she said. But it didn't feel normal. Do you remember what they said? Just that we're not supposed to discuss operations with anyone outside the store. No social media posts. No talking to customers about ingredients. No mentioning vendors, not even to family. Jackson's pen froze mid-stroke. And what happens if someone does? Tasha swallowed. Well, James used to work back of house. He mentioned once that the filling tasted weird. 2 days later, he was cleaning bathrooms and getting scheduled for only 4 hours a week. Did he quit? He stopped showing up. Jackson tapped the clipboard gently, keeping his voice neutral. Do you know who delivers your filling now? Tasha nodded slowly. It's not the Golden Hearth truck. It's this plain white van. No logo. Shows up early Tuesdays and Fridays. We're not allowed in the kitchen when it arrives. Miss Polson handles it herself. Jackson leaned back, connecting dots faster than he could write them. Has anyone ever tried reporting this to the company? Carlos did, she said in a whisper. He used to be assistant manager. He told me he called the ethics hotline once. 2 days later, Miss Polson said he'd been transferred to another location. She looked down, but Diane found his uniform in the trash. And we never saw him again, and since then, no one talks about it. Diane pretends it didn't happen. Marcus keeps his head down. We're just told to keep our eyes on the line and our mouths shut. Jackson stood slowly, thanked her. She hesitated at the door. Is something wrong, sir? He gave her a small, measured smile. That's what we're here to find out. She nodded and slipped out. He sat for a moment longer, staring at his clipboard. The notes now formed something deeper than data, a picture of quiet fear, invisible control, institutionalized silence, a manager who intercepted complaints before they reached corporate, a team too scared to speak, and NDAs designed not for compliance, but for intimidation. A knock broke his focus. Marcus, the young floor supervisor, peeked in, tense. Sorry to interrupt, but there's a delivery early. One of the special ones. Jackson checked his watch. Thursday, not a scheduled day. Thank you, he said, standing. Let's see what shows up when it's not supposed to. As he followed Marcus out of the break room, he passed Tasha at the service line. She didn't say a word, but the way she looked at him wide-eyed, quietly hopeful, said enough. Someone had finally come. Someone who wasn't afraid to see what was really inside the crust. The delivery van pulled up 15 minutes early. Plain white panel truck. No logos. Dark-tinted windows. Rear gate clattered halfway open, sticking like it had 100 times before. Jackson watched from the far end of the prep line, clipboard in hand, blending in as the staff buzzed around him. Karen Paulson had arrived just minutes earlier. Her expression composed, her energy sharper, tighter, calculated. She hadn't acknowledged Jackson, just a clipped nod. The smile was gone, replaced by something colder. The driver began unloading unmarked crates. Everyone up front, Karen barked. This takes 5 minutes. Jackson stepped closer to the walk-in cooler, observing, silent. One of the crates was clearly marked. Low 3821, the same batch code he'd tested the night before. Karen wheeled the crate into back storage herself, locked the cooler behind her. No one else moved. No one questioned it. When she reappeared, apron smoothed, voice even, she turned to Marcus. Take over the register. I'll be in the office. Jackson stepped forward. Mind if we review the invoice for that shipment? Karen didn't blink. It's already logged in the system. I'd still like to see the physical copy, Jackson said. Standard QA protocol. A pause. Her tone sharpened. That won't be necessary. Not rude. Just final. Jackson stared at her for a long moment. Miss Paulson, I'd like to speak with you privately. 10 minutes. She sighed, forced a smile, gestured toward the break room. Jackson followed, closed the door behind them. Then he reached into his back pocket and pulled out his real ID badge. Not QA, founder, CEO. He placed it gently on the table. Karen's face didn't change, not at first. She stared at the badge, then at him, then back again. The color drained from her cheeks. Her hands curled in her lap. I thought you looked familiar, she murmured. Not familiar enough, Jackson said. Until now. A long silence stretched between them. Somewhere outside, a fryer clicked on. A microwave door slammed shut. Life continued, unaware that the ground inside this room had shifted. How long? He asked. 6 months. 9. Does it matter? Karen's voice was taut, defensive. I did what I had to do to keep this place running. You did what you had to do to pad your margins, Jackson said evenly. The cost of ingredients skyrocketed, she snapped. Our reimbursements didn't. HQ kept demanding consistency, but gave us no flexibility. So yes, I improvised. And guess what? No one complained. Not once. They trusted us, Jackson said coldly. They trusted me. And you replaced real apples with syrup and cellulose and preservatives that wouldn't pass a school cafeteria audit. Karen's eyes dropped. Flicked to the ID badge. You could have just called, she muttered. Scheduled a visit. But no, you had to come in disguise. Play the hero. This isn't about me, Jackson replied. It's about the 12 stores I've now flagged. The fake vendors. The matching invoices. The employees silenced with fake NDAs. The fear. The lies. Her lips pressed into a line. You don't understand what it's been like out here. You're right, Jackson said. I don't know what it's like to risk customers' health to protect a bonus. She stood suddenly. If this is the part where you fire me, just do it. But don't pretend it's about justice. You're doing it because I made this work better than you could. Jackson stayed seated, calm, steady. You're not wrong. You made it efficient, profitable, but shortcuts always lead somewhere. He leaned forward, and we're there now. A knock broke the tension. Marcus poked his head in, eyes wide. Sorry, but there's a woman from corporate out front, Dana, and three, security officers, and someone from legal. Karen's eyes widened just slightly. Thank you, Jackson said, rising. Ask all staff to gather in the dining area. We're closing, temporarily. Karen said nothing, but as Jackson left the room, he felt the burn of her glare press against his back. Out front, the store had gone silent. Dana stood near the entrance with a clipboard and a team behind her. Customers had been politely refunded, offered vouchers, escorted out. Jackson stepped into the center of the room. Attention, everyone. My name is Jackson Hart. I'm the founder and CEO of Golden Hearth, and effective immediately, this store is closed. For internal audit. Gasps. Staff froze mid-task. Behind the counter, Tasha raised her hand to her mouth in shock. Jackson's voice remained steady. You're not in trouble. Most of you had no idea what's been happening here, but we now have evidence of widespread fraud, unapproved ingredients, falsified records, deliberate concealment. Starting now. That ends. Dana stepped forward. All staff will be interviewed over the coming days. You will be placed on paid leave. Anyone who cooperates fully will retain their position. When we reopen, anyone who participated knowingly will not. Jackson turned. Karen had emerged from the back. Her posture had changed, less combative, more cornered. She opened her mouth, then shut it. There were no words that could save her now. Jackson turned back to his staff. If you ever wondered if someone was watching, if someone was listening, he paused. The answer is yes. We always were. We just weren't listening hard enough. That changes today. The room stayed still, silent. But it wasn't the silence of fear anymore. It was the silence right before the storm clears, and something better takes its place. 3 months after the shutdown, Jackson stood inside the newly renovated Scranton store, watching a fresh tray of apple pies roll out of the convection oven. The smell at first buttery crust, real cinnamon, the unmistakable warmth of slow-simmered fruit, the kind of smell that made people stop, breathe in, and remember something. The storefront had changed. The opaque glass was gone, replaced with wide, clear windows giving customers a full view of the kitchen. Stainless steel counters gleamed. New labeling systems stood at every prep station, and every single ingredient from flour to filling carried a bright red QR code linking directly to a live verification system. No more secrets behind the line. That was the point. Diane, now in a maroon manager's polo, stepped beside Jackson, wiping his hands on a towel. Numbers are up 32% since reopening, he said, and the loyalty program brought back almost all the regulars. Jackson smiled. They came back for more than pie. They came back for trust, Diane said, nodding. In the dining room, Tasha welcomed a group of high school students, visitor badges clipped to their shirts. She led them toward the kitchen line, pointing to labeled bins and explaining the difference between organic thickeners and artificial gums. It was part of Golden Hearth's new outreach initiative. Real transparency. Real education. Tasha caught Jackson's eye and smiled. Her name tag now read, Assistant Manager. They're here for the demo, she said. Want to start with the story? Jackson nodded. He stepped forward, adjusted his sleeves, and faced the students, most of whom looked like they expected to be bored. This pie, he began, holding up a fresh slice with the glistening lattice top, was the first recipe. My mother taught me. She believed people could taste truth, that even if they didn't know why, they'd know if something was off. A few months ago, we discovered that some stores were selling something that looked like this, but wasn't. It was cheaper, faster, and fake. A girl raised her hand. Braces. Wide eyes. Did you catch them? Jackson considered it. We did. And they were held accountable. But the bigger question wasn't who did it. It was how did we let it happen? The room went quiet. The answer was simple. We stopped checking. We stopped listening. And the people who did speak up, we ignored them. He looked back at Tasha and Diane. Both stood quietly behind the students. Watching. Listening. That's why we changed everything. Just the pie. The system. The people. The culture. After the students were led to the observation deck, Dana entered quietly from the back, holding a tablet. Final rulings came in, she said. Karen Paulson 6 years. Fraud. Obstruction. Food safety violations. Her brother's facility? Shut down permanently. Other managers got 2 to 5 years. Full restitution ordered. Jackson nodded slowly. Good. Not just for us, for the customers they lied to. News outlets are calling it a case study, Dana added, saying the way we handled it set a new industry standard. But Jackson wasn't thinking about headlines. He was thinking about the man in line that morning, a retiree who'd come in for one more slice before his wife's appointment. The way he smiled after the first bite. The way he said, "That's the one. I knew I wasn't crazy." That was what mattered. That and the quiet promise to never let it slip again. That evening, after closing, Jackson gathered the team. They stood in a loose semicircle, tired but proud, wiping hands on aprons, sipping from paper cups. He looked at them, new hires, old hands, people who stayed, people who came back. 6 months ago, he said, this store was in crisis. Not because of bad luck, but because people forgot who we are. He paused. But some of you didn't forget. Some of you spoke up. Some of you held the line. That's why we're standing here today, not just reopen, but better. He reached behind the counter and unveiled a plaque. The letters were carved in clean script, hung just above eye level right beside the prep window. It read, "Integrity is the ingredient you can't fake." Applause broke out. But Jackson felt something else, not relief. Redemption. The store wasn't perfect. It never would be, but it was honest. And that was enough. On his way out, he passed Tasha, still organizing the volunteer log from the school visit. "Learning anything new?" he asked. She looked up. "Yeah, that we're not just baking. We're keeping a promise." Jackson smiled, stepped out into the cool night air, and paused beneath the Golden Hearth sign. In life and in business, shortcuts may look like solutions, but the true cost of cutting corners, it doesn't show up on a spreadsheet. It shows up in trust, lost, in voices, silenced, in harm, done quietly and slowly. The lesson is simple. You can fake ingredients, you can fake numbers, but you can't fake integrity. Sooner or later, the truth spills out, and when it does, the people who held the line will be the ones who rebuild what mattered all along. If this story moved you even a little, share your thoughts in the comments. Ever faced something that looked right, but felt wrong? We'd love to hear your story. And if you believe more people should hear stories like this, stories of truth, of courage, of second chances, subscribe. There's more to come.